Okay, it's a pretty big question, but is Doctor Who about to be cancelled again? Just in case. Hit it, Ian! Doctor in distress. Don't go into a frenzy, don't go into a panic, nothing has been confirmed. Because that's what today's video is all about. Now what spurred this on, you may ask? Well, this article, with an extract from a new interview with showrunner Russell T Davies, has quite a few interesting things to say about the future of the show. It's now official that Disney have not yet renewed Doctor Who for a season 3. For those of you who are uninformed, back in 2023, they begun shooting seasons 1 and 2 basically back to back. Season 1 is already out, and Season 2 is deep in the post-production pipeline, set to come out next year. We also currently have The War Between the Land and the Sea, the spin-off show, actually filming. That's official, it's begun. But what happens after that? And why haven't Disney confirmed that they're still interested in Doctor Who? Well, this video is going to explore the likelihood of a cancellation, or at least a hiatus. I'm going to try and create a fairly balanced look at things. Because I know the internet's full of hyperbolic statements and drama everywhere. I want to preface this with, I'm not a naysayer, I'm not dooming the show, I absolutely love Doctor Who, and for the most part really enjoyed Season 1. So in no way am I hoping, or wishing, or willing into existence any form of cancellation. I mean, before we fully dive in, it's worth noting that Doctor Who fans have quite the history of this. I think the evil shadow of the original show's cancellation back in the 1980s has loomed large over the show ever since. Even though I wasn't even born when the original show was cancelled, since my earliest days of interacting with Doctor Who fandom online, I can remember so many headlines about the show being binned off or cancelled or this is the last season. So as I say, there's no point in panicking. This is just something we're kind of accustomed to as Doctor Who fans. I also think maybe the kind of parasocial relationship with the fandom and showrunners like Russell T Davies encourages people to worry that the show's going to be cancelled. As Doctor Who fans, we love to know so much about the behind the scenes of the show. It's also a natural thing to worry about if you're a fan of a franchise, like you don't want that product to die. But this fear of cancellation, I think, has got worse and worse and worse in recent years, and for good reason. The TV and film landscape it's a mess currently. I mean, this kind of takes us on to our first major point of this video, but if you're looking at other similar franchise shows, even on Disney+, a good case study is Acolyte, the Star Wars show, which has just been cancelled, officially cancelled after Season 1, even though they were setting a load of stuff up with this cool guy. Disney Plus are known to just cancel shows if they aren't doing as well as they'd initially hoped. The show Willow has just disappeared. It was never released as physical media, it's been taken off the streaming service, and it's gone. So the worry that this could happen to a show like Doctor Who, which actually achieved similar viewing figures to a show like Acolyte, is genuinely real. I think a good point of comparison for both seasons, because they're both 8-episode seasons, Acolyte and Doctor Who Season 1. The final episode of Acolyte was estimated to have been seen by around 4.4 million people. That's worldwide, exclusively on Disney+. And the closest figure we have to that is that Doctor Who's season finale, The Empire of Death, was seen by 3.69 million people. If Acolyte's been cancelled, what's stopping Doctor Who from being cancelled? Well, one, that figure is the 7-day consolidated figure for the UK and iPlayer. Disney Plus don't really release viewing figures, so it's kind of difficult to know where Doctor Who ranks on their platform. We know while the season was airing that it was hitting some of the top 10s, but it never went above position 5. I'd argue, this is my personal take, I might be wrong, I don't think Doctor Who has done as well as Disney would have hoped, which maybe is one of the reasons they haven't yet renewed it. So if Acolyte's been cancelled, what's stopping Doctor Who? Well, one, it's been leaked by official Disney things that Doctor Who is considered a low-budget production for Disney+, which works in Doctor Who's favour. Because you've got to remember, Disney don't own Doctor Who, it's a co-production between the BBC, Disney+, and Bad Wolf, thus all the funding isn't solely from Disney. So it requires both the BBC and Disney to be happy with the show, rather than in the case of Acolyte where it is just Disney. And if Disney are unhappy, it vanishes. That's not how Doctor Who works, luckily. As long as it's doing somewhat well on the platform, probably means Disney are just going to keep it around. I mean, Doctor Who can function with a low budget anyway, so for all we know, Disney may be happy with it, but they may take a bit of money away if it isn't doing as well as they hoped. Now, while the viewing figures maybe aren't that high, it is worth bearing in mind that events like this exist.
This Doctor Who prom must cease!
The Doctor Who proms happened only a couple of days ago with 2 showings at the Royal Albert Hall, which, for those of you outside the UK, that's a big deal, big venue.
Thank you very much, good night!
I was there and it was absolutely fantastic. Also, quick side note, thank you so much to everybody that came up to myself. I was with Tharies and a bunch of other WhoTubers and Doctor Who Instagram people at certain times, and so many people came up to us and were like, we love your guys' content, and that means so much. So genuinely, thank you to everybody who came to say hello. But back on track. Events like the Doctor Who proms bring in so much money for the BBC. It was a smash hit, and I think the BBC absolutely not letting Doctor Who go anywhere. Sure, maybe there's a possibility Disney are gonna up and leave. Doctor Who is one of the BBC's biggest earners in terms of fiction and drama. It's also the biggest show for my age demographic, because so many people nowadays aren't watching TV, especially Gen Z. However, Doctor Who does incredibly well in the viewing figures with younger people, unlike almost every other BBC show. And obviously, to keep an establishment functioning, you're gonna need to get young viewers secured so that they grow up and become fans of these franchises, and Doctor Who is the prime target for that. Even considering the merchandise, and as I say, events like the proms, it pulls in so much money for the BBC. Think about how many action figures, I mean, look behind me. Like, the amount of money people spend on this franchise is insane. So I guess it could kind of be like The Simpsons, in that even if not that many people are watching the new stuff, keeping the show going so that the merchandise and that business side of it can still function isn't necessarily a bad business move from the BBC. Also, it's worth remembering Russell T Davies is still in charge. He is probably the biggest person in British television, and yeah, his opinion, his sway, his writing has a lot of power. So if anything, that's going to reassure the BBC and Disney that Doctor Who is something worth keeping. However, one negative on this is that the BBC is kind of dying. It is a possibility that by 2027, the British public will no longer have to mandatorily pay, that was a weird way of phrasing it, people will no longer have to pay a TV licence, which means the BBC are slowly being defunded. Over the past 14 years of Conservative government in the UK, they've chipped away and chipped away and chipped away at the BBC to the point where it is genuinely on its knees, which is a huge shame, because it's such a great service, and to lose it, it scarcely bears thinking about. But that's also, in a way, a positive for Doctor Who. The BBC are somewhat dying, and arguably, as I say, the biggest show for new audiences and the biggest show to bring in money is Doctor Who. Also, as I mentioned at the start of this video, the fact that a spin-off show is in the works does bode well for the future of the show. If they're happy to commission a spin-off, why wouldn't they commission season 3? Now, if they are going to commission season 3, this is both Disney and the BBC, when's that going to happen? Well, Russell has suggested that they're probably waiting till after season 2 has aired before they officially commission any more Who. He says here, I think the decision will come after the transmission of series 2. Oh, I do find this statement a little bit odd because this is the first time that's ever been brought up, which to me kind of feels like it's a new development. Russell spent so much time in 2023 saying that there's going to be yearly Doctor Who content. Doctor Who isn't going to go off air for a year or two. However, if they wait until season 2 has aired, it's probably going to be a year or two's wait until we get any new content. Hit it, Ian! I do think that this isn't the original plan. I think that the new season of Doctor Who didn't do quite as well as Disney had hoped, thus they're a lot more apprehensive to greenlight any more. Especially because the streamers, like the big streaming services, are kind of collapsing anyway. As I keep mentioning, the TV industry's in such a weird place because businesses like Netflix came along, took everything, but it's an unstable business model. Like, it doesn't really work. So things like Amazon Prime, they're introducing ad tiers, which then just becomes television. If you've got channels, ad tiers, and it's a mess. But I do kind of think it makes sense from a business perspective for Disney to wait out the end of season 2 and see if things pick up, because often a lot of shows do relatively well in their first season, but season 2 or 3 or however many more are where fans really jump at it. So I can see why Disney are waiting. It's a good sign that they haven't cancelled it. They haven't yet said there's no more Doctor Who. They're keeping it on the line. Who knows what the future holds? Russell himself even says in the article that it's an industry decision. It seems that at the moment only huge shows like Stranger Things or House of Dragon are guaranteed second seasons. Doctor Who's in this weird middle category of it's a high-end TV show, but it's not the highest end or the lowest end. It costs a lot of money to make, and if it doesn't bring in as many viewers as people would like, it is kind of in jeopardy. I mean, it's also worth noting with viewing figures that people just aren't watching TV as much anymore anyway. I mean, you're part of the problem, and so am I. I mean, YouTube in the grand scheme of things is a relatively modern invention. So's TikTok. So's Instagram, so's all these other social medias where people are consuming content constantly. We used to only have TV, but we have so many different varieties of ways people can consume content now. It's so much more individual and personal that TV shows just aren't being made as much anymore. I also can't remember off the top of my head, but I think shows like Friends are some of the most watched shows on streaming services like Netflix, and they haven't aired a single episode for about 20 years. A lot of young people go back and rewatch old stuff. It's why Russell is a genius for putting together the whoniverse on iPlayer, because so many people are going to go back and watch the original 2005 revival of the show. But let's bring this all to a conclusion, because I've been rambling for a while. I'm going to give you my take. Is Doctor Who getting cancelled anytime soon? While I think Doctor Who isn't doing quite as well as everybody's hoped, I mean, Russell's literally admitted that, it is doing really well for its target demographic. Young people watching TV are sorely needed at the moment. So 1, let's stop worrying about whether or not the show's going to be cancelled. We've got a second season, we've got a Christmas special, we've got a spin-off, all on the way, so let's look forward to that. Because I also think, even if Disney pull out, we are getting Series 3 of Ncuti Gatwa. I have a feeling it might be his last, and I don't know about the future of the show beyond that, because there also isn't a clear successor to Russell T Davies, but there's no way within the next couple of years that the BBC will give up on Doctor Who. Even if Disney pull out, I reckon the BBC will be there. Russell said as much in an interview, in fact. He said that if they had to go back to making stories on a very, very low budget, they could. And they would. I mean, some of the best episodes of Doctor Who, like Midnight, are incredibly cheap. So while it is nice to have this big budget, it doesn't require it to function. I think realistically, there probably will be a hiatus. Maybe a year or two, maybe it'll be somewhat bridged by the airing of the war between the land and the sea, but I think there's a mini hiatus on the way again. How many? There's been so many hiatuses. I do think Russell's dream of like yearly Doctor Who isn't gonna happen, sadly. But I think season 3 is almost a definite. Whether we have to wait till 2026 or maybe even 2027, I don't think the show will be cancelled for at least another season. After that, who knows? I don't know. You don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. That kind of rhymed. Someone remixed that into a song. There you go. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, as ever, please do remember to like, comment, subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. Drop a comment down below, because it helps appease the almighty YouTube algorithm. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.